Hi there, I'm Vincent Bos, and I'm a life coach, relationship coach, and breakup coach. You can change the language of this podcast in the YouTube video settings. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the worst places to go on a first date. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Subscribe to my weekly support emails. The link is in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing the worst places to go on a first date. So if you're planning to start dating, it's important to know what types of dates to go on, but more importantly, what type of dates not to go on. First dates equal first impressions, and often your only chance to get things right. In today's podcast, I'm discussing the 3 worst places to go on a first date. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is the movies. Now you might be listening to this and thinking, the movies? That is surely a classic first date, to go with someone to the cinema. Surely that is a legendary, brilliant place that I should be offering to meet this new person. But the important thing to consider here is we are focusing today on first dates. We're not focusing on any dates. We're not focusing on a date that you might go on months into your relationship. No, this is first dates. And therefore, we have to consider what a first date needs, arguably more than anything. And I would suggest that is communicating. You need to really test out that communication between you both, and you need to see and feel the vibe. Now, if you go to the movies or a place like the theatre, it is the same problem that you're going to encounter. You're going to be going somewhere on your date where you're not supposed to talk. You're not supposed to have conversation. You're supposed to go to the location, look forwards, and enjoy what you're watching. Maybe a bit of laughter and a whisper here and there, but you are not getting to know one another. You're not having great conversation. Now, I know you might say, well, we could meet up beforehand, or maybe we could spend some time after we went to the movies. And of course, that is true, but if the bulk of your first date is in a location where you can't even talk to one another, and you're not really even looking at one another, you're just looking straight forward, well, in my opinion, that is a bad first date. And if you are the person who has asked this new person to go on the date and they have said yes, even if they have accepted your offer, they might be thinking to themselves, well, I would actually rather have gone on a date where we could get to know each other. Now, there will always be caveats to these suggestions that I'm putting out there. Maybe, for instance, you met in some type of movie type connection. You may have met in some type of connection via the theatre, and hence it is a logical step for you to go on such a date. But I would say that most of you listening are not going to fall into this category or in the potential other categories that you may hear me speak about a bit later in today's podcast. Yes, there are going to be those rare instances where perhaps it could somewhat work in that regard, but most of the time, if you go to the movies or the theatre on a first date, you are not using that first date to the way it could be used. You're not getting to know one another, you're not having conversation, you're not even really looking at each other, and this is not going to give a great first impression to that other person. And even if you think, well, they like the movies and I like the movies and this was a great idea, okay, maybe they're not going to hold it against you, but you're certainly not going to get the most out of the date. You're not going to get to know them, and more importantly, they're not going to get to know you. And if, for instance, there is just a tiny bit of communicating, which this person that you're on the date with doesn't think went all that well, maybe they won't give you a second chance to go on another date. Even if you think, well, if we'd actually spoke more and if they actually got to know me, they would like me. Well, guess what? You've just wasted 2 to 3 hours not actually speaking, instead just sitting next to one another. So my suggestion about one of the worst places to go on a first date, it's the movies. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like and hype this video. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is a walk. So today we're speaking about the worst places to go on a first date. And the second suggestion I've got that you should avoid is asking this new date to go on a walk with you as a first date. Now let me know in the comments if you have ever been on a walk for a first date, or if you would consider going on a walk for a first date. Let me know in the comments, because I appreciate some of you listening might once again think, well, what's the big problem? I think that is a great first date. It's certainly a situation where we can get to know one another. We can have conversation as we go on this walk, just me and them. That's great, isn't it? Well, unfortunately, you've hit around another problem there. As I just said, just you and them. And there lies problem. It's a first date. And yet, you're potentially going on a walk, maybe in a secluded area, with someone you don't really know that well. Now, you need to be considering safety. You need to be considering your safety, and you need to consider how they might be feeling regarding their own safety. Even if you think, well, I wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, they don't really know that. They don't really know you. So you need to consider your safety and you need to consider their safety. So even though, yes, it's true, you can certainly have conversation on a walk, you're not really necessarily going to be as comfortable as you could be, because there might be a few nerves, especially if you or they suggest you walk around this way or that way and you don't understand exactly where you're going, you're feeling a bit secluded, you're feeling a bit nervous. It is not the right vibe for a first date. On top of that, walking can cause other problems. Consider what you might wear to go on a walk. And I dare say it would be different to if you were going to a different type of date. Maybe if you went for a meal or some drinks or something. If you went to a place such as that, you would likely be getting a little bit more dressed up than if you were going on a walk. If you're going on a walk, you need to feel comfortable and able to walk. And that is the other problem. You're not really giving off a great first impression because you're not looking your best. How could you be? You're going for a walk. In essence, you're doing exercise. Is that really your best look? Is that really your new date's best look? Is this something that they will feel happy about? Going on a walk and potentially getting sweaty? Okay, is that something that they would like? Is that something that you deep down would like? When you put it all together, is this actually a great first date idea? In my opinion, it isn't. Now, with everything that I'm going to talk about today, it doesn't mean it's not a good date further down the line. It doesn't mean you can't go to the cinema months down the line. It doesn't mean you can't go on a walk months down the line or even weeks down the line. But what it does mean is that going on a walk for a first date is a bad idea. It's going to bring up concerns of safety. It's going to make you feel that you can't necessarily look your best or your new date look their best. And as I said, not only the clothing, but the personal hygiene. You probably don't want to be sweating on your first impression. And neither does your date. You don't want to be smelling bad. You don't want to be looking like you are sweating and going red and just not looking all that brilliant. Do you really want to do that? Do they really want to do that? No, I don't think they do. So please make sure if you go on a first date, don't go on a walk. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is indoor climbing. Now, just hold on just a second before you think, wait, that is very random, okay? Yes, indoor climbing might sound very random. It might sound very, very specific. But we're not necessarily focusing just on indoor climbing. What we're doing instead is, in general, considering activities as a whole. So when we consider an activity which is not a great first date, it again links in with what we spoke about in point number 2, situations in which you can't really look your best, and you also might be sweating quite a lot, okay? They're not going to be great ideas. And indoor climbing is something that I've heard more and more often. Now, it doesn't mean that you might be thinking of this necessarily, but I've heard it a lot in recent times. So indoor climbing definitely seems to be something which is in people's minds. I've also heard of people speaking about hiking. So the whole concept of hiking, indoor climbing, all that type of thing certainly seems to be more prevalent nowadays. Again, I don't think it's a great first date. Whether we're considering how you look, how they feel, how you feel, the sweating once more, the safety aspect, especially going out for a hike. I mean, that is like an extreme version of a walk in the middle of nowhere. So you can see why these things are not good ideas. Now, it doesn't mean that all activities are necessarily that bad. I've heard people have great success playing mini golf, also known as crazy golf. That can sometimes have success as a good first date. Okay, you can't really be looking your best, although you could certainly look smart casual. You shouldn't really be getting a sweat on. And not only that, you are likely going to be surrounded by other people. And ideally, that is what a first date is going to be somewhat connected to. The fact that yes, you can have conversation like you could by playing mini golf, you could have a chat. But not only that, you are surrounded somewhat with other people in the background. You are not secluded, you are not alone, you're not feeling vulnerable, your partner's not feeling vulnerable, and yet you still can have that conversation. It's not like the cinema, it's not like the movies. It's not a situation where you can't talk. You can talk, but you've also got people not too far away. And if you can do something where you're not overly sweating, where at the very least you could look great in a smart casual sense, that can be really, really good. Now, my advice in general would be go to somewhere kind of quiet, but not in the middle of nowhere. Maybe a country pub, maybe even some type of cafe. Although, again, what would you be dressed? What would you be wearing? Most people like to try to look their best, especially on a first date. So use your common sense. But if you have a wild idea about on a first date going indoor climbing, I would certainly think that doesn't really fit the bill, along with other certain activities that probably don't as well. If you can have good conversation, if you can make sure you look as good as you can, and more importantly, your date. This isn't just about you, it's about how they feel. And right now, they might not feel comfortable telling you the truth on how they feel. Don't make them feel awkward. Make things as easy and smooth as possible and have a great time.